So I got a question. So how did you end up meeting Joan Rivers, and were you already deciding to stop stand up before you met Joan, or did you want to maybe open for Joan? I mean, what was the whole relationship? Because
No,
you wrote some books with her. I believe you worked on a book with her daughter.
a couple
I
of
mean,
them. We got lucky. They both hit the New York Times bestseller list. We caught a break. Well, she put them on.
so how did you meet her? I mean, because Joan Rivers, it's funny. I saw her documentary and it was so great. And like you said, you growing up, and I remember when she had her show on Fox or whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
and just I remember watching her, and she made me laugh. And my parents, my mom and dad, my mom, her Joan Rivers and Buddy Hackett would make my mom laugh, make her laugh her ass off. And as a kid, I remember that. But so, how did you end up meeting Joan and then working with Joan? Because she's a legend, and
Yeah.
as a writer, you have to have the chops to get that job. How did it all happen?
Well, it's funny because it was on a long continuum. When I first started, before I started doing stand up, when I was taking that comedy writing class back in 1980, 81, whatever it was, someone told us that Joan Rivers would buy material from the outside if she liked it. So I found out who you fax it to in her office. And I wrote like 50 jokes and I just faxed them over. I said, "Hi, my name is Larry, and I wrote these and blah, blah, blah." And I get a call from one of her assistants saying she wanted to buy 7 of those jokes. It was like $10 a joke. It wasn't about that. It was like, oh my God. So I did that until I started doing stand up on my own a few months later. Fast forward decades. I'm working regularly on the Mark Twain Prize at the Kennedy Center as one of the writers. And they're honoring George Carlin, who had passed away. He was being honored posthumously. They announced he was accepting the award, and then he died. Joan was one of the people coming down to honor George with the Mark Twain Prize. And so she gets there and she says, "I didn't really write anything. Can you match me up with a writer?" So they put me in the room with her. She goes, "Your name is familiar." And I said, "I wrote jokes for you a million years ago." So I'm sitting in the dressing room, like during rehearsal with Joan. And she has no material. She didn't bring anything. She goes, "What makes you laugh?" And I just said, "The folly of the Holocaust." So she, "Oh, you got some balls." She goes, "What's your phone number? I want to work with you." So I gave her my number. We wrote a very funny little thing for that night for the Kennedy Center. And she calls me the next day. And she said, I want to write with you. You're very funny. I'll never forget, I asked, I said, "What are the boundaries? What's off limits?" She goes, "Nothing." I said, "What about Edgar's suicide?" She said, "I had 10 minutes before they closed the casket." I said, "Oh, I'm going to like this. I'm going to like this." And she and I just hit it off like we'd known each other for 100 years. It was just like, I'm talking to you like I know you intimately well for all my lifetime. It's just a conversation. And we just got along. And we had the same sensibility. And they wanted her to do a book. So we came up with this idea called "I Hate Everyone Starting With Me." And we literally do it over the phone. I'd write something, send it to her. She'd write something, send it to me. We'd get on the phone and talk. And it became a New York Times bestseller immediately. She promoted it, obviously, and she's a big name. But it was really funny. It was really funny. And then they wanted a follow-up. And this is 2012. We're in Mexico on vacation over the Christmas holiday break. Here's how Joan was. She was so kind and generous. Over the Christmas holidays, Melissa and her friends and her son, whatever, and Joan rented this huge, massive estate in Mexico, in a place called Punta Mita, which is fancy schmancy. And she'd bring down 10 or over 2 weeks, she'd bring down 9 or 10 of her friends. And I'd go. And one day she and I are sitting there and she goes, "They want another book. They want it fast because this one's on the bestseller list." I said, "All right." And we decided we're going to write a diary. Let's just do a diary, make it easy. There's no through line, there's no thread. So we came up with the idea of Diary of a Mad Diva. And that hit the New York Times bestseller list. And after she died, she won a Grammy posthumously for it for best spoken word. It was really funny. And she was, here's the thing, it's so interesting. And look, you know this from doing this yourself and being around a long time. The character is an act. It's an act. She was the nicest, kindest, most generous, decent person If she met you now, she'd go, "Hi, Steve, are you hungry? Do you need anything? What can I get for you?" She wouldn't cook it. She'd say, "Staff, get him something." But she'd take care. It was like she was like your grandmother if your grandmother had a lot of money. She was just so kind. And what's interesting is, she turned into the potty mouth old lady. Not like that at home. She was elegant, and she was a lady and refined. And there was one time we were at Melissa's house, and Cooper, the grandson, must have been about 10 at the time. He cursed. And Joan laid into him. She said, "We do not talk like that in the house." He goes, "You do?" She goes, "That's a joke. It's on stage, not in real life."
Coop's Comedy Corner.